Mark Wheatley, and welcome to episode 234 of the Weekly podcast. Thank you very much for joining me today, as always. Thank you very much also to Jamie Earl for coming on last week. We talked about gambling addictions and betting and a lot of different stuff. That was very interesting that Jamie filled us in on, and he's part of a service now in Westmeath that's helping people with gambling addiction, and you can avail of the service. All the details are in the last episode's description. I'm sorry I don't have them here for you. I just realised how terrible I look on the camera again. And now some sort of things making noise as well, so that's good. Link for the description, buy me a coffee thing. This is the most hastily assembled episode I've ever put together, so it will probably be a pile of shit. So this is like 36 hours before the podcast is due to go out. We had a guest lined up. He had to postpone it for because of connection issues with the internet where he is. And to be honest, it's better that he did rather than it kind of cutting in and out, which is very frustrating for me and for the guests, but also for most importantly for the people who are actually listening to the podcast. So we're going to push that back. But I had to get something out, and this is what I've come up with. It's called Our Cultural Malaise. I had a list in my phone for the last couple of weeks, and every so often I think of something and I put it on the list. And it was, connected to our culture in general, like whether it be art and politics or miscellaneous or comedy or whatever. And I pop it in the list, and I had a certain amount, and I probably would have written out more. But, obviously this came up and this was the most obvious thing to kind of do. So, yeah, this is what I'm doing. I don't like when I think about the culture, our culture, the culture I certainly live in, I'm guessing it's quite similar for yourselves. I don't think it's dead. It's that's probably the question that's asked every decade, about the culture, and is it dead with all the things that are changing all the time. And I guess it's stuff that the youth are leaving behind and taking up. The older people don't know why, and maybe don't appreciate it. So it's easy to say the culture is dead, but I don't think it is. Obviously, I think there's a lot of great stuff that still feeds my mind and imagination, and yours, I hope. And this is important to note that the stuff that I read out here is my own opinion. It's not, it's not a dig at anyone. I'm not trying to annoy you. But I just think this is the stuff that kind of bothers me and kind of shows signs that the culture is kind of, a malaise is the word I'm using because that explains it better than, dead or even on the slide. And when I was growing up, the thing, when I kind of gripped on, I've talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to go hugely into it, but the thing that I kind of gripped on quite quickly was music, and I listened to a bit of Guns N' Roses, but then Nirvana came along and I listened to a lot of Nirvana. Then I started listening to the Beatles, which again is a culture that goes back, but it carries on. Obviously, the Beatles are a band that are always going to be carrying on, as are Nirvana at this stage, And what kind of came from that was, when your friends start listening to the same music as you, and then you start watching maybe certain films, and you get into a certain, your tastes develop, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think they continue to develop in some ways, maybe not in all the ways, not in like music. Certainly, I don't keep up with the music the way I used to. I think I definitely do with films and like art and things that are always kind of presented. But we look through a different lens now at stuff. It's not, like when music came out, it was like you had to go and buy the physical copy, which obviously now you can just put it straight on your phone. You don't have to worry about it, as long as you have an account on Spotify or whatever. And even with films, you can just click into Netflix and there's tons of films there to watch. It's not, the pursuit of the film is gone, where you have to kind of hunt it down a little bit. Um, and but that was part of the joy. I think that was part of the thrill of being able to be growing up in that time where we're just before everything became right at the touch of a button. And then obviously there's all the other stuff that kind of creeps in as well with social media and stuff, and influencers, and the spate of influences that there are out there now for all kinds of different things. So I'm going to probably talk about that, and I have lists here, and I've done them kind of separately, but they'll kind of meld together a little bit. But some of this stuff is going to be, yeah, very obvious. People have given out about it before. Some of it maybe less so. Hopefully, it's not all obvious. And some of it you're just going to plain disagree with, and that's fine too. So I put music at the top because you know I like to think I know where it went wrong. But I don't think I've pinpointed it to the exact moment where I felt it went wrong. You know, I'm still kind of scarred by the weeks at the top of the charts that Brian Adams had and Simply Wet had with those two awful songs. Love is All Around. What's the Brian Adams one? Um, it's the Robin Hood one. People will know it, but yeah. So those kind of things were always there though. Like the Beatles spent weeks on top of the charts, and many different acts spent weeks on top of the charts. That just wasn't my music spending weeks on the top of the charts. You know, one of the cool things that happened when I was growing up was Nirvana and Nevermind knocked Michael Jackson off the top of the charts. It was a huge news at the time because Michael Jackson was the biggest artist in the world at the time. So that was like a kind of indie grunge, whatever you want to call them, band from Seattle were knocking the most famous pop star in the world off the top of the charts, and that was big. Um, so I think the change in MTV was a big thing. I think again when it started, it was primarily a music channel, and it was music videos playing constantly, and you get music news and news bulletins and stuff. But they used to do kind of cool shows as well, where they'd have artists on doing acoustic sets. I'm not talking about Unplugged now. I'm talking about Ray Cooks used to present it on MTV, and I can't remember what it was called, but it had some really cool bands on the time. Blur and Oasis were definitely on. There was obviously a number of British bands on, but American bands too. And it was really cool. And like you constantly won't be watching music videos all the time. And, you know, sometimes songs suffered for it, like Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is still a skip for me when I'm listening to Nevermind. Um, and it's not because obviously it's a brilliant song, but it's been overplayed. But you were introduced to artists, I suppose, is more not that you were being overly played certain songs, but and they throw stuff in there that would pique your interest and want you to go out and buy an album and listen to that. And when I'm talking about albums, that's another thing that's really gone off, you know, the agenda for people because it's singles now more than albums, and it's like dipping in and out of albums, picking the best songs off an album that you've got the numbers of most streamed and stuff. And by the way, and like obviously there's still people who listen to Taylor Swift's albums when they come out, apparently are listened to as albums. I should ask my niece that really, but you know, it's not completely dead. But the idea of the album as a complete thing, it was the reason that Radiohead, Led Zeppelin, and the Beatles kept their albums off Apple Music for as long as they did, or maybe it was Spotify, because they wanted those to be listened to as albums, and they felt that they were written as one cohesive piece of work, and they didn't just want someone going in and listen to Stairway to Heaven and you know not listen to the rest of the album. And yeah, that's kind of a really a sad thing that's happened because the joy of going and getting an album and bringing it home and listening to it from front to back, and like obviously when you had CDs, you'd come back and you'd play the big hit first, but you would listen to the full album because you wanted to get your money's worth. Um, because it was like 15, well, maybe not 15 quid at the time, but say it was 10 at the time. Um, you wanted to get your money's worth. Where now you're paying a subscription for like 15 € or something for as many songs as you want to listen to, and you can just jump around artists and genres and stuff. So the death of the album is kind of it happened a while back, and it's sad, obviously. Another really a really sad time for music was Crazy Frog being number one or whatever it got. I'm sure it got to number one for a while, but that's probably the most insufferable song that's ever been put out. If people don't know what Frog is, don't look it up. But it's the Axel Foley theme tune from Beverly Hills Cop to the sound of a really annoying frog, and I think he was on a motorbike for some reason. But Well, I suppose because he was crazy, but um, that's really up there. That was one that really sparked some anger in me, and still does. Whenever I hear the Axel Foley, I was reminded of it because it's on one of the CDs in the gym. The Axel Foley theme tune is on one of the CDs, and that was reminding me when that came on of that, and I put it in my phone straight away. The X Factor, I mean, it's not a new point of view to suggest that the X Factor had a contributing factor, no pun intended, but the idea of and forget about what they used to do to people and humiliate people because that was horrible, but that was just being mean. That wasn't even about music, but about in the music side of things, it was throwing a person up into the top of the chart with a cover or original, whatever. And the push and the promotion alone of the show would get them to number one, until Rage Against the Machine decided they didn't want that to happen. But say they got to number one, and then they'd fall off, and then it was kind of like, oh, next up, and it became an assembly line. And Stock Aitken and Waterman, is that what they're called? Whatever they were called back in the 80s had that kind of thing, but they kind of were a little bit better at keeping up to, keeping some hits for their acts like Kylie Minogue and um, Jason Donovan and people like that who they followed up with a little bit, not hugely as Jason Donovan, but um, it's a strange one, X Factor, and I won't go too into depth about it, but it's rubbish. I think it's gone now. I'm pretty sure it is, but also another thing was kind of the kind of death of the indie labels. I know there's still indie labels out there, Rough Trade and XL Recordings and things like that release indie bands and smaller artists and give them a chance and give them a platform. But such is the kind of the monopoly of the huge labels that you don't see as many artists getting that chance. Um, and they'll I said to Martin earlier on today, I said they'll just record any old shit nowadays. There was this song on and there was just someone talking about getting an Uber so they could go drinking. That was essentially what they were on about. I don't know what the song was called. Um, but I thought to myself, obviously it was a song playing in the gym, so it was like a bit poppy song or whatever. But yeah, the indie labels kind of have fallen away, and money's tight in certain industries, and I understand that, and it goes back to streaming as well, and that's why it is tight because artists don't get paid very much for streams at all, compared to didn't get paid much for albums either, but they got paid more, and those indie labels have fallen off, and they haven't allowed that hasn't allowed smaller artists to get kind of their word out there, and they're kind of trying to do it through social media as well. But there's so much on social media that it's hard to get even your name forward and any of that. And another thing, I heard something yesterday about the singer. Some people will know her name, and I heard it yesterday, and I can't remember. But she recorded a song called Espresso, if that means anything to you. But she released her tickets for her gig in London, or it was in England, maybe it wasn't London actually. And they were like 60 quid or something. So as soon as those tickets went on sale, the others started going up because like the limited availability, as the less tickets, the higher prices they go, and they went up to 270 quid, pounds sterling, and a jump of £200, and it's kind of pricing certain fans, I guess some of the real fans out of the stadium or out of the arena or venue, and it's you know it turns people against them. Now this battle with ticket prices has been going on since I was born, but when it becomes something that's not allowing um people, the genuine fans who sit at home and listen to the music and aren't people who just want to get there so they can get a ticket and get a photo of them being there, because there is some of that too, by the way, and we all know that like people will go to things just so they can be seen to be at an event and they can afford to go to it. And the last thing you want to do is start pricing fans out of actual concerts, because concerts are kind of the last real thing that, well, I was going to say that focus your attention on music for 2 hours, but I'm not even sure that's real, because a lot of people will go to just wander around or take photos or look at their. I'm not one of those people, by the way, that give out about people recording at concerts or taking photos. I don't care. You do what you want with your own time. But there's real young fans because this artist would have a lot of young fans who want to see it, but parents can't pay it, and it's a shame. So that's going to ruin our idea of music and our culture around music because some of our best memories are created at concerts, especially people who are really into music. And I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast are like that. And like me, I've a great memories of like Blur being my first gig and subsequent concerts like Radiohead and Richard Ashcroft and all these great artists that I managed to see as I was growing up and people who I loved at the time. So yeah, that's a shame. Um, I kind of had a few on film, not as many on film actually, but I do have Marvel as it's not so much the Marvel films because I don't watch them, so I don't care that much. Um, I do think that sometimes you have to know when it's over, and you can stop putting out the same old content over and over again. But again, that's really not what I have a problem with. I have more of a problem with the merch side of things because I don't think, and sorry, this is probably going to offend someone, but I don't think that a 40-year-old person should be wearing a Thor t-shirt or Iron Man. Scrambles through his mind to find some names. But on Marvel, not just Marvel, DC is the other one I was not, but I just don't think it's right. I was talking to my friend Josh about it the other day, and he was like, "No, I don't think that's true." And I was like, "I've seen them in the wild. I've seen them out wearing like t-shirts with, Iron Man on it or something, and Iron Man 3 or um I genuinely think they shouldn't make them uh, in bigger sizes than small for that very reason. I know they won't because it's money, but um I give up on all that like, when I was I told that story about getting rid of my football jerseys, but I don't have, like, I'm a massive fan of the Beatles, as everyone knows, but I don't have Beatles t-shirts. And if I did, I wouldn't wear it out because I think you get to a certain age, and it's not like me being, oh, fuddy duddy and all that stuff, but come on. Excuse me for a second. Oh, I might, yeah. Sorry. So yeah, so and that like the whole thing about the Marvel stuff, it leads me into kind of sequels as well because that becomes such a big thing. Because as soon as a film makes a lot of money, it's immediately thought we'll make a sequel. It- yeah, and I understand the logic behind it. The studios want money and that's it. Like, but the lack of original content is incredible. Like I'm talking about original content that can be seen outside of an art house cinema or outside of having to buy a boutique version of a DVD or Blu-ray now that I've done before a lot. Um, but that this original work could be pushed a little bit more. But it's being swallowed up, and I don't know if you're in Dublin or you're in Cork or one of the cities, you might have obviously we will have a lot easier access to films, but in Athlone here, it's if there's a Marvel film out, it takes over two or three screens, and the rest of the screens battle it out for whatever else, and it's usually just a runoff of the ones that are out a couple of weeks before that. So it'd be like an animation or already another sequel, or one of those like big uh not so much Marvel, but kind of musicals or something that they're trying to push off on a festival crowd or whatever. So yeah, so down with sequels. I shouldn't really say that because like Godfather 2 is very good. Um, Netflix as a business is one thing. It's apparently it owes a huge amount of money. By the way, it's in serious debt. Netflix, but it churns out films now that are no longer of any worth to anyone. And I like the way they put up some old films now and again. I don't even mean old. They don't put anything, before 2000 up. But I mean, they're at least putting stuff up that was out 20 years ago rather than just putting out this absolute garbage. They make these things like Emily Goes to Paris or whatever it's called. Is it called that? I think it is called that. Emily in Paris? Emily in Paris. Was that a TV show? Anyway, there's something like that. And The Kissing Booth and those kind of films that are just rubbish. and they have no real value or worth to anything, and it's not going to land. So it's kind of I wonder now, like, what's going to be the one that be the films that hold on in 30 years' time from today. Um, and I hope it's not like Dune or something. Like, Jesus, that was the first one was so dull. And I'm one, if I watch the first one of anything, I'm like, I have to watch the second now. But I can't. And there's a third one coming out, and I can't even watch that. But that's again money, a huge amount of money. Now he's a respected director. I understand that. I get the source material is very famous, but it's such a ridiculous plot about spice, do you know? Um, kind of went off track there. The lack of auteurs that are they're not being given the chance where even when I think back to the 90s when you had someone like um Paul Thomas Anderson coming through and he was like really allowed to like spread his wings a little bit because they saw some potential in him. Maybe not at that moment did they see the money, but they saw potential for him to become what he is today. And they used to do that in the 70s all the time. Like talk about The Godfather. You can talk about sorry, Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Altman, all these like auteur directors that were and writers that were given this chance to create these brilliant original films, and they're not really needed anymore because of what I just talked about, the lack of absolute original content. And I know funding is a problem in everything, but especially in something like film, where it is being gobbled up by those huge um, companies in line with those major studio heads and studios. So I can, it's that's what's happening. It's not really being filtered down correctly, which is, obviously it's a shame because I love films and I love good kind of original, interesting ideas and not the same stuff thrown out there. But I know so many people who absolutely love Marvel and will go to any single Marvel film. Every single Marvel film that comes out, I can name 10 people who will go to every one of them. So, who am I to say? And Bong Joon-ho, I've mentioned his before when he collected his best Oscar award for Parasite. And well, he won three for that. But he talked about people not reading the 2-inch letters at the bottom of the screen. Um, that's still not happening. Nobody wants to read subtitles, and some of the greatest films ever made um, have obviously been made outside the US and Britain. I don't know if you were aware that other countries made films, but there's so many that people are missing out on because they don't want to read. And this I know people have watched some dub stuff on Netflix, but don't watch dub stuff. Jesus, the voice actors can't act. They just have good voices. So they sound ridiculous when they're trying to. I've watched 5 minutes. I watched 5 minutes of the shark in Paris, and I'm actually going to watch that because it's meant to be really good considering how ridiculous the plot sounds. But I watched 5 minutes of the dub version just to see, and I thought, Jesus, this is dreadful. So yeah, films are again like music, dying a little bit. I'll probably be a better judge of films than music because obviously the younger generation would love the music that's coming out now, and they don't give a shit about my rant about albums. In Ireland, there's always some stuff. Ireland are the well, I'm not going to say we're the best at it, but we have some brilliant capabilities of building up the worst of the worst when it comes to comedy and not even any of the art. It's more comedy, to be fair. Um, I'll name a couple like Dustin the Turkey he's somehow still around. We sent him to the Eurovision, right? Nobody cares about the Eurovision, but like have some and like have some respect for the taxpayers. I guess I don't know. Um, but it is only the Eurovision, so who cares? Mrs. Brown's Boys, a TV show that went to Britain and became very big in Britain, was like 7 million per episode or something. That's a lot. And it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. I don't think I could possibly ever laugh at anything that happened on that TV show. And if I did laugh at anything in that TV show, I'd decide that I was no longer an atheist, right? I'd believe in God so I could go back to confession and confess my sins for laughing at Mrs. Brown's Boys, and then I'd go outside and do my penance of whatever 10 Hail Marys. Then I'd renounce God again and back to the same thing. But that's how strongly I feel about how unfunny Mrs. Brown's Boys is. Um, the two Johnnies. Nope, don't know what that's about. How we've decided to make two DJs in Ireland who apparently just talk shit to each other all the time, and not interesting or funny or anything, just exaggerated nonsense. I heard it once. I heard it first. Sorry, I heard it first in a petrol station in the inside the petrol station. I was waiting for food or I was getting food or something, and I was thinking to myself, who's the? I genuinely thought it was a phone call between two dopes, and as I was leaving, I didn't really know who the two Johnnies were at that point. This was a few years ago, and I came out, and the next time I heard them was on a TV show, like a chat show, and I thought they're terrible. And then I hear that they're selling out Gaelic football stadiums. Um, I don't know what they do, by the way. I know they sing. I think they sing. They had an album out anyway. So there's enough people to go, like 30,000 people in one space down in, it might have been Limerick, watching these two DJs. What are they doing? Like, what did he do? What did he actually do? I don't like. I my my mother and my younger brother were watching the. They have a TV show now. Actually, I forgot to mention it. If you didn't know, and they, my younger brother and my mother were watching it. And the next day, I was talking to my mom, and she said it's the least funny TV show of all time. And my younger brother says the worst TV show of all time, which is great news. And I kind of, I probably could have guessed that, but it's always good to get confirmation of how shit some people are, so you're not just you saying it. Because you're thinking, am I mad? Does the whole country love these fellas except me? This is probably a unnecessary dig, but it's a throwback. There was a comedian called Carl Spain, and he used to be on a TV show, and I don't know what the TV show was. I don't know what it was about. I remember it was on years ago. So, and I was drinking at the time. Maybe that's why it was on. Why I left it on. But I remember seeing him on something, and I was like, no, I'm not one for stand-up comedy at all, or stand-up comedians. I don't really find them that funny. But I remember seeing this guy and thinking to myself, he can never last. He's awful. And then a couple of months back, I was flicking around, and on one of the Irish stations, there he was talking to a chat show host. He's still around. He's probably nowhere near the worst, known comedian in Ireland, but there can't be many worse than him though, because he was it stayed with me. And this is what I'm talking about. This we build these people up like Dustin and the two Johnnies in particular. We build this up as like, look at us, aren't we hilarious? No, we're not. Um, Irish TikTok comedians. There's another one I have on. I'm having a go comedians a bit more than is probably necessary, but the ones that are like. So if it was me, so this is how I normally talk, but I'd be on a comedy thing, and this is the way I'd be like, oh Jesus, would you get down off that roof? Oh, would you stop? That's all they do. They put on Irish accents, but like strong Irish accents. Would you come down off that roof, boy? That kind of stuff. It's never been funny. Like, why is that funny? Just talking loudly in a Cork accent or something. Um, getting warm now. You see, that's how much I'm getting annoyed. And I'm in an apartment on my own, getting annoyed at my own writing. But and this isn't a particularly Irish problem. I like TikTok. I see the TikTok videos on Instagram because I'm not on TikTok, and it's not just Ireland, but when they're lip syncing to other funny in inverted commas clips from things, like how is that popular? Like what? Like when did that become a thing? Um, it's really strange. It does. I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me in the comment section. I then decided to put. I'm actually getting roasted. Um, in the miscellaneous section, these are just things that annoy me more. But all that stuff was cultural stuff, right? So the culture of like our comedy and what amuses us has gone down the toilet and probably never to return. This is probably less so. Some of it is and some of it's not. The first one is not at all. I just put this in because I think it annoyed me one day and I just stuck to it. I'll stick to it forever. The Haribo adverts where the grown-ups are lip synced with kids' voices. You might know it, you might not know it. They're so annoying and irritating, but again, it's not really a cultural thing. I think what ruined television, what a wild, what a big statement to make. I was mentioning this to Josh the other day, and he said, "Oh, I like that. Take Me Out." If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, there was a TV show on a number of years ago, and it was like a row of women or men, and a man or a woman of the opposite sex would come down an elevator, yeah, and come out, right? And then if the person didn't like them, they'd hit a light, and the lights would go out, and by the end, if there was still some lights left, they'd get to pick of the people who were still up, right? It was just fine, whatever. But it was the fact that like Paddy McGuinness used to present it. There was an Irish version with Ray Foley, I think it was, that presented it as equally a shit, by the way. But there was this thing where he used to go, "No likey, no lighty," and there was something about this phrase that used to really bug me, and I didn't really know why until a couple of years later when I saw uh, I don't know if I saw a rerun or heard someone say the phrase to do with something. Anyway, it doesn't really matter all that much, but something reminded me of it. And then I thought to myself, the reason I mean so much is because he was talking to adults in that TV show. So he was saying no likey, no lighty to adults who were pressing lights off, like grown ups. And I thought, are we speaking down to like? I'm not saying he was speaking down to them in a passive aggressive way or a mean way or whatever it might be. I just think he was thinking these people are idiots anyway. So I'm just going to use this phrase, not just because it rhymed or whatever, but because I can. I'm going to make a fool of these people. And like these people are there to be made a fool of. If they go on to these stupid shows, that's fair enough. It's like Love Island, those things. If you go on those shows, unfortunately, you're there to be made fun of because of how what we've become. And I'll get into this a bit more. But reality TV, unfortunately, has become one of those things where people desperate for fame. Um, Unlike the X Factor in a way, towards the end, people were so desperate for fame that they'd put themselves through the rigor of like the public or kind of the public eye and how we speak to people online, like comment sections, which are horrible places, really. I don't think I've made more than five comments on a comment section before, and they've all been on positive comment sections. I've never gone on and thought to myself, do you know, I'm going to make fun of this person now because they can't sing or they're not funny or stuff. I'll just come onto a podcast and say it. No, but look, hey, all right, I get it. I get the how ridiculous I am, but the idea of these people who were kind of coming from nowhere, and it's happened in Love Island. I think there is one of the shows where somebody's taken their own life because of what happened after Love Island. And you wonder, like one instance is probably not enough, and it clearly isn't enough for them to kind of pull the plug on it. But um, you'd wonder about the merits of a TV show that could do that to someone or could create such a storm. Um, that people would, and people are going to be shitty to them. You just know, and they're not built for it, and they haven't been experienced it before. Um, and when you mix in things like reality TV, um, the influence of it on the culture, because it does have a big influence on the culture, and how we use comment sections or we use places where we can go and really not just slag people off, but actually go and slag them to their face and you know, um, create mental health problems and create, um, you know, unfortunately pushing people over the edge and they're not capable of understanding. There was the idea of if I'm pretty sure it was Love Island, by the way. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure where the contestant took his own life. But he wasn't ready for it. Um, he apparently didn't have any aftercare from the team on Love Island either. So he was just left out there to take all the abuse he was taking, and he took his own life, and it's terrible, and that's part of the culture now. I'm not saying that's part of the culture where people are trying to make people take their own lives, but it's the fact is like there's no repercussions on the other side. So it's like it's not like walking up to a person on the street and saying, "Oh, you're a dickhead" or whatever, and getting a slap. There's no repercussions. You're just going to sit back and turn off your computer or to put your phone down and watch the rest of the show. That kind of stuff. I'm not here to kind of, I'm considering I'm after having an awful go at poor Carl Spain and the two Johnnies, but I just think that whole thing is a kind of a mess. Another thing that, if you want to see me go completely stock still, no expression on my face, just nothing. Come up and say, it's like that bit in The Simpsons when, if anybody says that to me, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't care. Stop. This is clearly aimed at certain people, a couple of people. Stop creating, stop like having your whole life and all your references um solely on Simpsons references or because it's something will happen and they go, oh, it's like that bit in The Simpsons. No, but it does. You don't have to because when something happens, you don't have to reference something else. Something can just happen without you saying it's like that. It doesn't have to be, oh, like if I drop something on the floor, oh, that's like that bit in The Simpsons. No, well, it might be like that, but we don't have to mention it. We just have to. Can we just talk about me dropping the thing on the floor rather than, especially talking about The Simpsons? Because Jesus, how many times are you going to say it in your life? Friends also is another one. Now, excuse me again. This is the heat in this room. It was nice and cool before I started recording. It's like it's like Friends as well, right? So I've seen more episodes of Friends than I have Simpsons. I don't like either of them. I think my brothers and I used to watch Friends when it was out, and I think it was one of those things where you just watched it because it was on at that time, and I don't think we took a much major enjoyment from it. They both watched The Simpsons, by the way, but they're not the kind of people who go, "Oh, it's like that bit in The Simpsons." But there are people who go, "It's like that bit in Friends," and like, I don't want to know what happened in Friends. I think like what six unfunny people who you would not go near if you lived in the same area, and they would not go near you, by the way. They'd look down on you. Um, they're in the whitest part of New York. New York has never been that white. And but when people reference The Simpsons or The Friends, it's like for a start, they're really old shows. I know The Simpsons is still kind of knocking around, but is it? Maybe it's not. Um, I don't know if they still show them, but they are really old. Like where, like if we are going to reference something, where are the references now? You was Sopranos a reference heavy show? Was Breaking Bad? See, I'm still naming old shows though. What's out now? Succession and those kind of ones. You don't really hear people. I wonder, like, there's not a bunch of 15-year-olds watching them, though, is there? There was when The Simpsons and the Friends row, but there's probably not 15-year-olds watching them now. Do teenagers watch TV shows anymore? I hope they're not watching The Simpsons anyways, because I have to listen to my nieces and nephews saying it's like that in The Simpsons, and then I'll have to go through the whole explanation of things can just happen without being referenced to something else. When this episode's over, I'm going to dump that water in my head. Um, Another thing that this has probably always been a thing, and it's definitely always been a thing for certain people, but not admitting you're wrong. I know a number of people. We all know a number of people who have a real problem with admitting they're wrong, and it might be a small, tiny thing that means nothing, like a question on TV on a quiz show that you got wrong. Um, these things that don't matter, that you're it's like it's like we're wounded by being wrong or something, and that we won't own up to the fact that we were wrong. So we're always trying to backtrack and get into it. Like I've done it before as well, by the way. I'm talking about someone who's always like being mature enough to know that I'm wrong. But if I am wrong now, I like to think that I say I'm wrong. Um, especially when it's well, especially when it's important thing. That's the most important time to admit you're wrong. But even those silly little things like when it's like when a TV show, quiz show I was on, and you got something wrong, and you're like, no, I said that, and that kind of stuff. It's very important to kind of open up, to be open about admitting you're wrong. because you don't learn. You do learn from your mistakes, obviously, but if you keep trying to convince other people that you're never wrong, you're going to start to convince yourself that you're never wrong, and that's a very dangerous area to be in because we've all been wrong before, and we all be wrong again. And I'm reading out these things now, and people will be saying I'm wrong because they have loads of Iron Man t-shirts at home. I can't get over the Iron Man and Thor references. Not one more person. I know Spider Man is in the other one. One more person out of it. Wolverine. Is he? Yeah, he's him. Yeah. Is he? Yeah. He mightn't be actually. He has, that's bloody those films out now, that Wolverine and Deadpool one. God, if I have to look at Ryan Reynolds and one more thing, every single thing he's on now, he's on every single. I'm surprised he's not on Ready Steady Cook. That's probably not on anymore. These dated references, just giving out about references, and now my dated references. Social media is another thing. I'm not going to go too much into depth about that, but it has inherent flaws that do have a wider kind of reach on the culture. Um, the pick me up, put me down kind of what would you call it? I think is the attention. Our attention spans are apparently lessening, which is very worrying. And I'm for someone who likes to read and things like that, and thinks that everybody should be reading a book. At some point should have every point in their lives to have a book ready to go or sitting waiting to be read. Attention spans are not good, and I think social media apparently is the problem for our attention span. So we need to really keep an eye on that. Whatever you're watching on social media, as long as it's not damaging you, don't let it damage your attention span because it's very important to have one. Um, I'm not going to read that one actually. I say comment sections, and recency bias is another one. This was something that was the first became a thing to me when the Millennium. My brother got this Millennium CD in 2000, and it had been voted for by I can't remember what magazine or whatever. But a poll had been done on the greatest songs, so it was a double CD on that. And number five on the greatest songs of that century was Robbie Williams' Millennium. And it just struck me as something that was like ridiculous because it was only out about a year, that song. And it was above like, proper classics. And ever since that, I've kind of always noted recency bias, and I've always seen it pop up and go, oh, there it is, the old recency bias again. And you see it on these polls all the time with music and film and stuff, that there'll be something like something in there that's only out a year but was huge when it came out, and it'd be like Infinity Wars. Is that what it's called? No, not the Infinity Wars one. The other one. There was one of the Avengers series that was like the biggest one. I don't think it was Infinity War. I think it was something else, right? Where they clipped their fingers or something, and where they clipped their fingers, and no description after that. But that would probably be top 10 now if they voted, and and that's again in all of the world, like that's the top 10 film ever made. It's silly, it's not like it's not. I'm not saying it's a bad film. I'm just saying it's irrelevant when it comes to films, like the real films I'm talking about. Um, but we all kind of do it, I suppose. Like the stuff that I'm listening to today is music from the 90s. We'll say I'm talking about the songs I was listening actually this morning, and I'd probably have that really high up now if somebody asked me like, oh, like what's your favorite stuff? But if you asked me a year ago, it probably wouldn't be that high up. It's just the way our minds work. I understand that. But when we're talking about the bests of something ever, we have to just be very careful with recency bias because we just will end up looking ridiculous, basically. I even felt it and I'm a huge Radiohead fan, but I remember they got number one album of all time in '99 or something with OK Computer. It's one of my favorite albums, but it's nowhere near as good as Revolver or as influential as a Revolver, and it would be to some people, but it's really not because it was as influential to Radiohead as Radiohead are to the people now. So without Revolver, maybe okay, I know how things work. The most important things I think that are encroached on our culture, especially recently, would be fake news and the idea of it. It goes back to George Orwell's 1984 when they were talking about, essentially about fake news. I can't remember what was the phrase they used on that. I should have checked that. But that idea of was it truth speak or something? Was it that? Maybe it was. But the idea of people just telling you right into your face a lie, and you will almost back down from it a little bit. The kind of idea that Kellyanne Conway made a comment about alternative facts. It's essentially just means lies. And if you say it enough times and you say it with enough belief in your voice, people will believe you. And then you can start peddling it. And obviously, it goes out saying that Donald Trump is the king of it. And he's the one who started going on about fake news. The mad thing was he was talking about other people saying it. Excuse me, about fake news that other people were the ones doing it, but turns out he was. But that's hugely damaging to our culture, because when that starts getting in, the kind of hive mind starts becoming a thing where people start believing the QAnon thing or the anti-vax or whatever it was. It doesn't really matter what I'm talking about, but um, it's like the flat earthers, and they want to prove that the earth is flat. So how did they convince themselves that it is? Well, they go to YouTube channels where people talk about the earth being flat and saying, well, if I had this melon and I had this lemon and it went around it, well, it wouldn't go around it. It would, like this kind of stuff it's like the echo chamber effect, where instead of going, okay, well, I believe the earth is flat, so I'm going to go to the opposite side of it, and they have to prove to me that the earth is round. Um, it's the idea of, like, I'm right. I'm in no way am I going to go near anybody who disagrees with me, just in case I can be somehow proven wrong. So I'm just going to stay in this echo chamber, and I have echo chamber written down underneath the fake news thing, because it's become they've become very close together. Become like they work off each other a lot, and I think, like, the fake news is very damaging. Uh, uh, when I was growing up, 24 hour, 7 days a week news became a thing. Sky News was the first in Britain, anyway. And that, I think that's just as damaging. The cycle of constant news after news, and people will just watch the news for hours on end. And every news channel, I don't know if you know this, but they lean a certain way. um, and you will be like, for example, Fox News is pro Republican, CNN is pro Democrat. Okay, so in America, if you take those two, Sky News in Australia is so hates liberals. Um, I don't know what Sky News in Britain is. I don't watch it, but it's so damaging 24/7 news, because that does become an echo chamber too, because it becomes the idea of every time someone says agrees with you, you're like, oh yeah, he's great, he's great. But any disagreement at all, oh, they're terrible. All of those people are terrible. So it's not just this person from a political party. It's like the whole political party. And, like, politics is such a dodgy place anyways for all that kind of stuff, because it seems as if you go any way against your party, if you think, like, you can't say, oh, this councillor has this ridiculous idea about, they're going to hedge cut the hedges when the nests are there. Um, Now, if you don't see that as you see that as a bad thing, but you think, I can't say that because it's my party. Well, that's outrageous, like, because you're going against your beliefs for your party. And I think that's what's very dangerous about politics in Ireland and Britain and America, is that, like, you can allow for someone in an opposite party to be right every so often. You don't have to vote for them. You can just be more open to it. But that's the echo chamber of your own political party just telling you the same thing over and over again. And I didn't really want to get stuck with that, actually. So I kind of removed myself from the whole thing of political parties and things. Now, if I was forced to vote gun to head, I know who I pick, but I'm not going to share it with you because you don't share it with me. Um, but the most important thing to at least to the art sector of our culture is critical thinking, and how basically it's died and I don't think we'll ever get it back. Especially when you come in with things like comment sections and things like that, um, and also hive minds and echo chambers. You used to have like uh, film critics, and I always cite Pauline Kael, the American film critic, as someone who would be very. She would strip down that film and be honest about what it meant to American society. Not it doesn't always mean something. Not every film means something, obviously. But I remember her reading her review on Taxi Driver or something, and she was talking about um the impact of you know violence in New York and political violence, and how we look at politics, and how even like before incels was a thing, she was kind of looking at the incel culture, like about the Robert De Niro character in Taxi Driver. Um, and it's brilliant. Like it's such a good read, and like she half the time she gives away the ending, but like she doesn't. Who cares? Like it's a film, it's going to end. Um, I should have put spoiler alerts in here, but anyways, I didn't. But the idea again of the way books were used to be reviewed was so good, Um, uh, anything, art, the idea of. I remember reading about. I can't remember the critic's name, but he was talking about Andy Warhol and how uh, was it still a Warhol production or a Warhol piece if he had a factory of workers working on it. And I know Damien Hirst has that now, and I don't believe it is. Like, if I'm going to buy a Damien Hirst piece, I want him to have made it with his hands, even if it's just a print. But yeah, I remember this piece about it, and it was brilliant. It was so well put together, and it really made you think about like why art meant so much to people. And I don't know if it does now, because I think a lot of it, if we're talking about film, a lot of it is this kind of popcorn culture now, where it's like, one in, one out, and then it's gone. You don't have to worry about that film. You've seen it. And I think the films that came out in the 70s in particular is probably the best decade for films. They seem to be, whether the directors meant what Pauline Kael was seeing, for instance, I don't know. But she certainly saw it, and it takes a very bright person to kind of review a film like that. But critical thinking is there's not much call for it anymore when it comes to art, and it's just pumping stuff out and just see what it's like and see if it sells. And if it sells, great, we'll make a sequel. But if not, we won't. And I think the book world is slightly different than that, but I don't think it's much different. I don't think it's much better. I think some people will get out there and be pushed. Um, but others will kind of go by the wayside, even though they're brilliant, brilliant people and brilliant writers. But for to critically think about anything is difficult. But to when I'm specifically because I've talked a lot about art in this, I think I try to think of it in a way of like, why, if I didn't like the book, why didn't I like the book, and what was the artist trying to say, and why didn't I get it? And same goes for films, and same goes for music, for anything like that. And you're not going to get everything, but you have to at least try to understand it, I think. And you can't just uh, press play, press stop, and then walk away from it. And, unless you really dislike it, unless it's the two Johnnies or something, you don't listen to it again then. But I think we all should be really thinking critically about what we listen to and what we read and what we watch, because we're all we have. And these people are working hard at all the art they're putting out there. And it's the least we can do as to just one and done it, and never go back, and never think about it again. Even if we don't write our thoughts down, it's good to think through it. And critical thinking comes into everything, obviously, but I'm far too unqualified to talk about it in any other way, other than the arts. If you have any entries on that should be in this list of our cultural malaise, please send them on. It would be a lot of fun to talk with you about them. Send us a message in the on the social media platforms or whatever. If I was too harsh or not harsh enough, very important to let me know about that. I do not want to live in an echo chamber of my own thoughts. So if you do think anything about these thoughts, please let me know. And like I said, this is all my opinions. It's a bit of fun. And like, don't go into the comment sections and ruin me because then you'd be doing exactly what I said was bad about comment sections. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thanks to John for the old forgot the name of it there for a second, YouTube. Thanks to my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jared and Calvin. You subscribe to us on YouTube. Also, subscribe to my music channel if you want Derek Wheatley Music on YouTube. We're on Instagram, Facebook, also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, etc. Once more, thanks for listening to me for this hour. I had to get this one together, and I hope it was okay. Yeah, listen, everyone, have a lovely week, and hopefully I'll be back next week with a guest. So take care. Bye.